Good Shavua Tov, everyone. This is the Mishna that should have been for Friday. We are learning Mishna Yoma Perek Vav, Chapter 6, Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah 1. So now we're going to be talking about the two goats that were mentioned previously. One goat, which we learned about how a lottery was chosen, where one was designated as a sin offering to be offered as a sacrifice, a sin offering sacrifice, and one that was for Azazel to be pushed off the cliff. So the Mishnah begins with some details about these two goats. Shnei Sirei Yom Kippurim, the two goats of Yom Kippur. Mitzvasan, the preferred way to perform this mitzvah is Shiyu Shneim Shavin, they should both be the same, B'mar in appearance, which means the same color, Uva Kaima, the same height, Uva Damim, the same value. They should be bought like one. They should be bought at the same time. For instance, buying both from the same person at the same time. But then the Mishnah tells us, even though they are not exactly the same, as mentioned before, ksherin, they're still kosher. They're still valid to be used. If it came out that one was bought today, one was bought the next day, ksherin, they're kosher. So these are the preferred ways of doing it, but they're not mandatory. Now the Mishnah continues. One of these two animals died. If it died before the lottery, which designated one for the sin offering, one for Azazel, took place, just take another animal to be a partner with the other one, and then you'll go through the process of the lottery. But if, let's say, the animal died after the lottery was done, which means one animal was designated for the sin offering and the other one was designated for the Azazel. So now you're only left with one. Yavi zug acher, you have to bring another pair, another two he-goats, and make a new lottery over them. You can't just go ahead and take another animal and say, well, this animal will replace whichever one died. Because the animals, whether it's for the Azazel, whether for the sin offering, must be chosen through the lottery. The animal that remained alive, whether it's the Azazel one or the sin off or the Chatas one, you can't now put it through the lottery because it was designated before. That designation can't be changed. So therefore, it's necessary to bring two he-goats and make a new lottery with both of them, where you're going to have one lottery be put on one animal as a sin offering, and the other one for the Azazel. Now, depending on which one died, you're going to land up replacing the one that died and having two of the ones that remain. Now, b'yoymar. Now, then the continuation of the process after making the new lottery is that this person says, or this is what he does, im shel shemes, if let's say the one that died was the animal that had been designated for the sin offering, for the chatas, it was called chatas l'Hashem, the sin offering for Hashem. That's what it means, im shel shemes. If for the name, the one for Hashem died, so the animal, the new animal, that the lottery for God, meaning for the sin offering for God, fell upon, it will now take its place. The original one died, this new one takes its place, right? But now we're left with two of the others. We're left with two for Azazel. And if the one that died was the Azazel animal, and the one that the lottery for Azazel fell will now take its place. Okay, so that one is now taking the place of the one that died, which was the Azazel. But now we're left with two that are designated to be a sin offering. The second one, meaning the one designated the second time, is going to pasture until it becomes blemished. Then it's sold, and its value will then fall for the communal burnt offerings. For a sin offering of the community, of the congregation, does not die. So here's what's going on. You're dealing here with, let's say the case was the one that was Lashem, the one that was for a sin offering died. So now that you made a new lottery over two animals, the one that was designated for Hashem, for the sin offering, replaced the one that died. But now I'm left with two Azazels. So which one is going to be used? Which one's not going to be used? Or the same thing, if let's say that Azazel one that died. So now, now after the new lottery, you replace the Azazel with the new Azazel because the first Azazel died. But now you're left with two animals designated for Hashem, designated for the sin offering. Which one go? Which one is going to be used? So the Mishnah says, "V'hasheni yirat sheyistoev." The second one is going to pasture until it gets blemished. That means you will not use the second one actually you will not use the second one. The second one is extra. It will not be used for whichever one remained. If let's say you have two Azazels, the second one designated for Azazel from the second lottery is not going to be used for Azazel. It's going to pasture until it gets blemished and then be sold. If let's say you have two animals were designated for the sin offering, so the second one that was designated will not be the one that's actually used. It's the first one that's going to be used. And it's the first one that's going to be used because the first one was designated first. So it doesn't lose doesn't get pushed off. It was the first one. It doesn't get pushed off. And therefore the second one is extra. What are you going to do with it? You can't just go ahead and do anything you want with it. It's been designated as a sacrifice. It's got its body's been sanctified as a sacrifice. So what do you do with it? So what you have to do with such an animal is let it pasture until it gets a blemish. Once it gets a blemish, you can sell it, you can redeem it. The money goes off the animal, goes onto the money, and then the money belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. But at the same time, this money that now belongs to Beis Hamikdash is going to be specifically used for something, because this animal, whether it was for the Azazel, this second animal, whether it's for Azazel, whether it's for the sin offering, it was sanctified as a sacrifice. They're both considered sacrifices. So even when you redeem it now, the money has to be used for a sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? So we've learned previously that there was something called the Kitzah Mizbeach, which means that we never want to let the altar be idle. And therefore, there was a special fund and money that was consecrated for the Beis Hamikdash to be used for this, that would be used to purchase animals in case the Mizbeach, the altar, would be idle. You would buy these animals and bring them as burnt offerings. And they were referred to as the dava, voluntary, referred to as voluntary communal offerings. So the point, but the very important point to bear in mind here is that the animal designated the second time, meaning the extra animal that's coming from the second lottery, it will not be used. What's going to happen to it? It's going to be left to pasture, become blemished, because you can't redeem it if it's not blemished. The animal will then become it will not be consecrated anymore, and the money will be used for the communal burnt offerings. Now, there could have been another option here. There could have been another option to, instead of having the animal pasture and blemish, it actually could be left to die, because we have a rule that if, let's say we're talking about a personal sin offering, a private sin offering, person bring a sin offering, designated the animal got lost. So then he took another animal, designated it for his sin offering, and he brought the sin offering. He offered it, and then he found the first. So what do you do with that first animal? That is a situation this is specific to a sin offering. When a sin offering comes out that it was designated sin offering, and then it can't be brought under certain circumstances, such as what we just said, because it was replaced by another one, the halacha is that animal is left to die. This could have been possible to say that here also, because in essence, you've got, let's say, two sin offerings, right? You have there was Azazel that died, and you now have two sin offerings from the original lottery and from the second lottery. The first lottery one is what we use. So the second one would really be an example of a sin offering that was replaced by a different animal. And it also could be left to die. But at this point, the Mishnah says you don't do that. Why? If you're talking about a private sin offering, we would let it die. But since this is a communal sin offering, then we don't let it die. Then we let it pasture, get a blemish, then it's sold, and the money goes for the Kitzah Mizbeach, for the voluntary communal offerings. So that's the first opinion in the Mishnah. The second animal is the one that is not going to be brought, It's the first one that was designated. That's the first one that was designated. It's going to be used. The second one is not going to be used. And the second one will be left to pasture and blemish, but not left to die. Rabbi Yehuda says, Thomas, the animal that you don't use does die. He doesn't distinguish between a private sin offering and a public sin offering. Therefore, this public sin offering is another example of a sin offering that was replaced with another, and therefore it's left to die. That's the first thing that Yehuda argues on. We're going to see now something else that shows us that there's another detail that Yehuda would argue on in our case. Now, our case again was where you had two animals that had been designated by the lottery, and one of them died. But now we have a new case. Rabbi Yehuda also said, he said something else. Let's say you had a situation where none of the animals died, but you're at a point where you're sprinkling the blood of the sin offering, as we've learned before. And what happened was that before you finish the sprinkling, nishbach hadam, the blood spilled. The blood spilled. Then what happens now? You got to replace it. If you're going to replace it, that means I have to go ahead and now I have to go and I have to take two animals and I have to make a new lottery. And whichever one the lottery falls on for the sin offering is going to be the sin offering. Okay. Says Tanakama, when that happens, that the blood spills, Yamas Hamishtaleyach, the one that was supposed to be sent, it's the one that dies. So here we have a very similar case where we have a situation where we have these two animals, or at this point it's at a later point, but we have the Azazel animal. It's still around because it's not sent away until after the blood of the other he-goat is sprinkled. Is sprinkled. And in this case, before you finish the sprinkling, that blood spilled. So that disqualifies the first animal for the sin offering. Says Rabbi Yehuda, when that happens, Yamas HaMishtaleach. The other animal that was part of the original lottery, it's left to die. According to Rabbi Yehuda, what we have here is a situation similar to before. The first animal, the blood spilled. I got to get enough. I have to replace it. How do you replace it? You can't just replace it. You got to go through another lottery. After the lottery, one is going to be the chatas, the sin offering, is going to replace the one that the blood spilled. Now left with two azazos. Which one is used? According to Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, Yamas HaMishtaleach. The one that was supposed to be sent to begin with. When the blood of the sin offering spills, then he says the Mishtaleach, the one that was supposed to be sent, its original partner, it's the one that dies. It's the first one that's not used according to Yehuda. And as Yehuda said before, whichever one's not used, yamas, it dies. It doesn't pasture, it dies. So here Rabbi Yehuda tells us that the first animal, meaning in this case, you're for sure replacing the sin offering. I have two azazels. The first azazel is the one that dies. It means according to Rabbi Yehuda, when you have this situation where you have these extras, when you have two of the same, the original one is not the one that's used. It's the second one that's used. Because Rabbi Yehuda says that first animal, at some point, at the point that the blood spilled and couldn't be used, at that point, it became disqualified. Can't use it. And once it's disqualified, it can never be used again. The fact that now I'm going to go in and do another lottery and now get a new one for the sin offering. Okay, so I have a new one for the sin offering, and now I have two for Azazel. Why not use the first as the first opinion would be holding here? Because says Rabbi Yehuda, once an animal becomes disqualified, it can't be used again. In this case, the animal became disqualified because the blood spilled. So that Azazel at that point of time, you couldn't use it. You had to make a new lottery. So that Azazel animal was disqualified. Once disqualified, it can't be used again. So according to Yehuda, that's the second Azazel animal that's going to be used. And the same thing would apply in the case before where the animal died. Where the animal died, and now I had to replace the one that died, and I have two of the same. The first one became disqualified. Once the first animal died, I couldn't use the other animal, because I had to make a lottery. I had to make a lottery. So before I made the lottery, that animal was disqualified. Once it's disqualified, can't use it anymore. So it really comes out now that Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama argue in two things. When it comes to having two of the same animal, do I use the first or the second? According to the Tanna Kama, according to the first opinion, I use the second. According to Rabbi Yehuda, I use the first. And whichever one, and now according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to the Tanna Kama, the first opinion, where it's the second animal that's used, the first animal, according to the Tanna Kama, that the first animal is used and the second one isn't used. According to the Tanna Kama, what happens to the second animal? It pastures till it gets a blemish. According to Rabbi Yehuda, whichever one you don't use is left to die. Okay. Mishnah concludes, final case. Meis HaMishtaleach. Now, let's say the case is where, again, you started off with the animals designated. And in this case, before the blood was completed, before its sprinkle was completed, the goat to be sent out, it died. It died. So what do we say? Yeshafech Hadam. The blood is spilled. It's spilled out. Which means that you can't now say, well, I'll make a new lottery and I'll go ahead and I'll designate a new one for the Azazel. And maybe, and now, at least according to the Tanna Kama, where it's the first animal that we use, then why not just, start it over again, right? Either, like we had before, start it over again. Because that animal at one point it was disqualified, but now everything was rectified, just like the cases before. According to the Tanna Kama, an animal that was disqualified, once the problem that disqualified it goes away, I can reuse it. So why not here in the same case? If the goat that was sent away died, so I'll make a new lottery. I'll replace the one that was supposed to be sent out now with a new one. Now I'm left with the blood of the first one, and I'm left with another one. So why not just use the first one? Use its blood. The answer, and the Mishnah doesn't say that. It says Yeshafech Hadam, blood spilled. And this part of the Mishnah understood that it's not, only according to Yehuda. It's according to the Tanna Kama also, according to the first opinion also. Here, everybody agrees that you cannot use that blood. And that's because in this case, the disqualification happened, meaning we're talking about that the Azazel died, it disqualified the blood. That means the animal was dead already, it was slaughtered already. Once a sacrifice is already slaughtered, and that's when it became disqualified, you can't use it again, according to everybody. In the first two cases, in either case, the animal that was left around, that was left alive, it was alive when it disqualified. So according to the Tanna Kama, a live animal can be disqualified permanently. Yehuda says it could. Tanna Kama, the first opinion, says it can't be. In this last case, disqualification takes place after the animal was already slaughtered. We're talking about the Azazel, the animal designated for the Azazel died while you were in the process of sprinkling the blood. That means it was disqualified after it's dead. After it's dead, once it's disqualified, it can't be used again. So Yeshafech Hadam, according to everybody, the blood's going to be spilled. And now, through the second lottery, I'm going to now have a new animal for the Azazel and a new animal for the sin offering, and I'll go through the whole process with these two new animals. Have a good Tvach Shavua Tov.